The story of the Marcos Dynasty, spanning over 2 decades of rule in the Philippines by Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos, is one of modern history's most sophisticated, comprehensive, and ultimately successful feats of political propaganda and image engineering. A dictatorship cannot survive on coercion and military force alone. It must also capture the minds, memories, and collective imagination of its people. The Marcoses achieved precisely this, successfully marketing themselves as Hollywood stars, national saviors, and architects of a golden age. This dazzling media spectacle was woven so tightly that dark realities like corruption, human rights abuses, and crushing poverty were effectively shielded or minimized in the public eye. The legacy of this propaganda was so enduring that it continued long after the regime's downfall, ultimately paving the way for the family's stunning return to political power. The first and most critical step in the Marcos propaganda machine was the seizure and monopolization of the nation's communication infrastructure. When Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law in 1972, with the clear intent to silence political opposition indefinitely, military tanks were sent not only to the homes of political rivals, but also to the headquarters of independent media organizations. Overnight, virtually all independent newspapers, radio, and television stations were either shut down or swiftly transferred to the control of Marcos loyal oligarchs, or cronies, who were deeply entangled in the regime's financial network. The ownership of the media was concentrated within the family and its inner circle, transforming the entire press into the undisputed mouthpiece of the government. Any critical voice or opposing viewpoint became virtually impossible to air. This absolute control allowed the Marcoses to continuously and uniformly broadcast their own narrative, creating a state of continuous hypnosis that solidified the notion in the public mind that the regime was an unquestionable authority. Marcos was not just governing the country, he was controlling the country's perception of reality. Ferdinand Marcos's image construction was strategically rooted in creating a mythological hero. His entire political career was built upon a fabricated foundation of extraordinary heroism supposedly demonstrated during World War II. He promoted himself as the most decorated soldier and relentlessly propagated the myth that he was the leader of the legendary guerrilla unit Ang Maharlika. This narrative was constantly exalted by the regime's media, enshrined in national textbooks, and became an unshakable part of the national story. This image of heroism provided him with absolute authority and the status of an unchallengeable national savior. Thus, opposing him was framed as treason against the Filipino nation itself. This personal myth was expertly reinforced by the myth of an economic golden age. Propaganda consistently presented the Marcos era as a period of prosperity, order, and massive infrastructure development. Visually impressive projects like highways, bridges, international airports, and expansive irrigation systems were perpetually showcased on headlines and television. These grandiose projects were effective in conveying a sense of modernization and national pride. However, the true cost was colossal. These initiatives plunged the country into record levels of foreign debt and served to mask the institutionalized corruption that funneled state resources directly to the Marcoses and their allies. The media expertly censored images of poverty, demanding that the public ignore the stark economic reality in favor of the engineered illusion of national progress. If Ferdinand represented the iron fist of power, his wife, Imelda, was the velvet glove that encased it and the dazzling face of the regime on the global stage. Imelda's image was meticulously crafted as a rags-to-riches fairy tale. Her ascent from humble beginnings to winning a beauty queen title and marrying the nation's most powerful man sold the Filipino people a dream of hope and luxury. She was not merely a first lady, she acted as a de facto minister of culture. Glamorous yet costly structures like the Cultural Center of the Philippines, or CCP, and the National Heart Center served as her grand showcases, intended to project an image of the Philippines as a cultured, modern, and cosmopolitan nation. Imelda's real propaganda weapon, however, was glitter diplomacy. Dubbed the Steel Butterfly, she traveled the world, meeting with complex and imposing global leaders, from Fidel Castro to Muammar Gaddafi. These high-profile meetings were presented by the controlled media as irrefutable proof of the Marcos regime's global importance and prestige. But the peak of this image engineering was her notorious extravagance. Her infamous collection of over 1,200 pairs of designer shoes, countless pieces of jewelry, and staggering international shopping sprees made her a global icon and a staple of the tabloid press. This excess, while seemingly a sign of moral decay, was a brilliant political tool. The sheer spectacle and scandal generated by her image overshadowed the darker realities of corruption and human rights abuses. Her luxury acted as a shield against scrutiny. People discussed the First Lady's new Versace gown or her latest jet-setting trip, diverting their attention from the widespread torture of dissidents and the country's spiraling debt. The humiliating flight of the dynasty during the People Power Revolution in 1986 did not stop the propaganda machine. It merely prompted a shift in format. Following the family's eventual return from exile, their son, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., spearheaded a systematic and well-funded campaign of historical revisionism to reclaim their lost political power. This effort was primarily waged on the battlefield of social media. Platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok became saturated with content that consistently repackaged the martial law period as an era of prosperity, order, and discipline. These videos were produced with high-quality aesthetics, imbued with a nostalgic tone, and completely devoid of any critical commentary. The abuses and corruption of the Marcos years were either omitted or minimized, while martial law itself was glorified as a necessary measure to restore discipline against anarchy. This sustained campaign of disinformation had a profound impact, especially on the younger generations who had not personally experienced the repression of the dictatorship. To them, Marcos was not the tyrant described in history books, but the charismatic and strong political figure they encountered daily on their feeds. The ultimate culmination of this strategy was the election of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. as president of the Philippines in 2022. This victory serves as a modern, painful testament to how the power of media and image engineering can prevail over historical truth and the demands for justice. The saga of the Marcos dynasty proves that the fight for political power is, at its core, a war of perception. Their propaganda machine blended coercion, luxury, nationalism, and the myth of a golden age to create a tunnel of reality that controlled the public's imagination. Imelda Marcos's infamous shoes are not just footwear, but they are a potent symbol of the dazzling curtain used to distract from and conceal corruption and suffering. Their legacy provides a vital lesson for the modern world. Even if a dictatorship is physically overthrown, the narrative and propaganda it seeded can survive and even flourish in the digital age, demonstrating the perilous extent to which the power of image can be used to rewrite history.